For the past 13 weeks, dating all the way back to May, Coach Pat Kilby and I have unpacked every single scholarship player for the North Carolina Tar Heels for this upcoming basketball season. But we are not done yet because there is a group of young men who we cannot leave out. Who is it, Pat Kilby?
The Biscuit Boys.
The Biscuit Boys. Let's do it.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, August 31st, 2022. Welcome in to the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. Joining me as he does every Wednesday is the man, Coach Pat Kilby. So glad he's here with us. We want to thank you for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or your first watch every single day. The show is free and available anywhere you get podcasts, so please subscribe now. It doesn't cost you a thing, and it'll make sure that you get your team every day. For those of you watching, if you would, please smash the like button and leave some awesome comments about the Biscuit Boys so they know how loved they are. Speaking of which, that is the goal here tonight, Pac, right? We want to make sure we've given all this love to all the scholarship guys, the guys that get all the minutes, but we want to make sure that we honor the entire team. And so our goal here today, folks, is to make sure that you know and love and appreciate these four guys, what they bring to UNC basketball, and hopefully young men just like them for all the years to come. Now, we're going to talk more about that, but let's introduce them first. There might be more guys that get called up from JV at some point this season, but there are four we know of right now. Pac, why don't you start and introduce us to Mr. Duwe?
Yeah, so Duwe Farris is a Biscuit Boy. He is forward, 6'7", 210 pounds. So dude's got a good frame.
Yeah.
Hey, and here's the deal, man. Like, I know we're going to talk more about this, but these guys aren't slouches. You know, these guys have good athletic bodies. They're good players in their own respective way.
Yeah.
They may not be your traditional Carolina Tar Heel, but they're good players nonetheless.
Yes.
So Duwe coming in 6'7", 210 pounds, repping number 34 for the Tar Heels. And you can find this man on Twitter and Instagram. Both of them are the same, Duwe Farris.
It's nice to have a unique name, right?
Yeah, absolutely. just slap it right in there. So, and he's a great follow on Twitter and Instagram. He's hilarious. So,
man, that's so good. Next, let me introduce you to Mr. Creighton Lebo. He is a guard for the Tar Heels, just like his dad. Before him, 6'1", weighs 180 pounds, number 25. As we've said, Jeff Lebo's son, one of the great Tar Heel guards of all time now, as you are well aware, back on the coaching staff, helping all these guards shoot better. That's why those free throw numbers and the three-pointers are getting up. But yeah, Jeff Lebo's son. On Twitter, Creighton is just inverted, Lebo Creighton. And Creighton is Creighton, just like that awful school in Nebraska that nobody likes because of what they did to Kendall Marshall. And on Instagram, it is flipped back around, Creighton_Lebo. Keep it going, Pac.
Yes, sir. Rob Landry coming in next for the Biscuit Boys. Rob comes to us from Greensboro, North Carolina, so he's a Carolina native. He is the son of Tar Heel legend Pierce Landry.
That's right.
Rob plays guard, 6'4", 190 pounds, and reps number 15 for the Tar Heels. My man Rob is not in the Twitter sphere, so can't give him a follow there, but he is on Instagram, Rob Landry 15.
Absolutely. Rob, if you are on Twitter and we just haven't found it, call us out. Or if you guys know where Rob is at, let us know. But for now, we're going to say Rob doesn't have Twitter and we're calling you out, homie. Get on the Twitter. Man, finishing it off with the last of the quartet of Biscuit Boys is Mr. Jackson Watkins. Jackson's going to be a senior this year, comes from Virginia. He is a guard as well, 6'1", 180 pounds. Jersey number is 30, which makes sense when you start to hear his social media handles. On Twitter, our guy Jackson is JWatkins_30. And on Instagram, just his name, Jackson Watkins 30. And so that is our for Biscuit Boys. Now, people might be wondering, like, hey, why on earth are you guys calling this quad of guys, this quartet? That's what I should be saying. The Biscuit Boys. Here's why. If you're watching, you probably know this, but let's just make sure that we're all on the same page. At North Carolina, when the Tar Heels score 100 points, Bojangles, I shouldn't give them free advertising, some company that sells chicken and biscuits, a little fast food down in the South, if Carolina gets to 100 points, there's this deal. You can get 2 sausage biscuits for $1 the next day. It's only valid the next day. And it's weird, Pac, because it's not honestly that good a deal. I mean, sure, a buck for 2 sausage biscuits, I'll take it. But man, like, give me a free Bowberry biscuit or something. You know what I'm talking about? Dribble that icing on there. Let's get after that Bowberry. So it's just funny how that becomes such a thing. But people just love it when Carolina hits the century mark and they go crazy over these Bojangles deals that they're probably not even going to go out and do the next day. And so these walk-on guys are called the Biscuit Boys because usually they're able to get into the game around the time where Carolina's close to scoring 100 points. And so 100 points, walk-ons coming in. It's a mashup made in heaven, the Biscuit Boys. I love it, Pac. And so here's where I want to go with this with you. You as a coach are very in tune with, very aware of everything that the entirety of a roster can bring to helping the whole team, the on-court product. And so I just want to start there. As a coach, why are you appreciative of the players that work hard in practice, do all the stuff, but rarely see the court?
Well, for one, I mean, that just shows the character of them. They're willing to do all the hard stuff without really much of the glory. And so as a coach, I mean, you want those guys that they say, hey, let me play for the name on the front of the jersey and not the name on the back. And so for one, that's just a testament to them. But number two, they make such a huge difference in the culture, right? So you've got a bunch of guys that, first of all, they bring energy on the bench. I mean, if you've been to or watched the Carolina game, it's pretty clear. You can see those guys. They're active. They're engaged. They're cheering their teammates on. They're coming up with these crazy celebrations, you know. And so they're fun. They're engaging. They bring the energy. When there's a timeout, you can see Jackson Watkins and Creighton and those guys running onto the floor to chest bump RJ and Caleb. And they just bring so much life into the program. And here's the cool thing. You guys see it on game day. I guarantee you that's their role in practice too, is to get in there and bring energy, make their teammates better, be uplifting. And so they're playing a role that we don't necessarily see, but man, they're key. They're important.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And it's funny when you talk about the bench, like here's a place that a lot of Tar Heels see it. Obviously at Carolina, Theo Pinson was a huge, big minutes eater player. In the NBA currently for the Mavericks, he's just not playing that much. But that is what, man, Theo is like this ultimate bench teammate. And I feel like nationally now is known and renowned for that. And that is what these guys are bringing to Carolina currently. And like you said, Pac, so much that they bring in practice in terms of being able to be the dummy offense of like, hey, Carolina is getting ready to play this team. Okay, so you're going to pretend to be Paolo Banchero or whoever it is and emulate the Duke offense and defense and things of that nature. And so, there are things that we aren't seeing behind the scenes. And so I just want to start off by making sure the general public really realizes everything, all the time, blood, sweat, tears, dedication that these guys put into the team, probably in some ways more so even than the scholarship guys, because they have to just work often that little extra bit harder. Really want to keep talking about a lot of this, but we need to go ahead and take a break, and then we're going to dive right back into talking more about this quartet of the Biscuit Boys. So let me tell you about Bet Online, which is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. There's also reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering info. From live in-game betting to scores and podcasts, they have you covered. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And so, Pac, I ended that last little bit by talking about some of what the walk-on guys will bring at practice, acting as like the dummy offense of a team. And I know it's not actually, I think I said Paolo Banchero. It's not actually Paolo Banchero, but how can these guys like getting into character essentially, why can that be so beneficial in the run-up to a game?
Well, first of all, I mean, just take a second to realize how difficult that is for them, the IQ they have to have.
Yes.
You know, the guys that play, they know Carolina stuff. They know what we run. They know how we're going to guard different things. These guys are having to learn different things every game. Okay, so this is a difficult challenge, and they have a high IQ for the game because of that. But, man, how important it is it's key. It's crucial because they're giving you a live look at what you're going to be facing. Now, their skill sets may not match exactly. I understand that. But just understanding and guarding something live in practice can go it can pay huge dividends down the line. And so those guys do a great job of that, I'm sure. And I'm sure the coaching staff does a great job of preparing them. But, man, it's a crucial piece to your game plan every week, and being able to give the core group of guys that play a live look about what they're going to be facing.
Man, yeah, that's so good. And so that I love that point about, man, not only do you have to know everything your team does, but you've got to learn and study like without many days in between. It's not like football where you got a whole week, right? Like this ain't Rudy for Notre Dame. Like, okay, I'm going to run the scout. Like you play Duke on a Saturday and then you got to go up to Syracuse on Monday. So, man, we're going.
It's not just offense. It's not just a defense. It's set plays. It's inbounds plays. It's sideline out of bounds plays. It's tip-off plays. Like, there's a lot that goes into this, guys. And so those guys do a really good job.
Nice. Now, here's where I want to go next, Pac, and you alluded to this when you were talking, I believe it was about Duwe and just what like big dude he is. I think when we think of walk-ons, we're often like, oh, like I'm 5'11", right? I'm not even 6 feet tall. And I think a lot of times we're like, oh yeah, the walk-ons are just some 5'11" dudes, probably like 170. And he's not. Duwe Farris is 6'7", 210. Like this dude is huge. Now, what I want to say is with all of them, I want to make this point loud and clear. While they might not be on the same level of the highest elite high-level D1 athletes, while they're not maybe Armando Bacot, these dudes, as Pac has already said, are phenomenal basketball players and would run you and me, folks, off the court. Like, so yes, while there might be some margin from the top D1 basketball players to these guys, the rest of the general public is down here somewhere. These dudes are legit basketball players. And so I think it's easy to assume that since they're walk-ons, oh, they're not good. Well, maybe comparatively again, but that is a mistake. Why is that a mistake, Pat Kilby?
Well, it's a mistake because number one, if you just look at North Carolina's history, it's actually more meaningful to be a walk-on, at the University of North Carolina than it might be to play on scholarship somewhere else. And so we've always, as a program, I feel like we've always had really good walk-ons and athletes fill those spots. But man, these guys, just look at their high school careers, right? So
let's look at it.
We know that Creighton Lebo, he averaged 17 points per game in high school.
As a sophomore.
As a sophomore, yep.
Yeah.
And he's a North Carolina High School Athletic Association state champion. You look at Rob Landry. He's a Greensboro Day School state champion. He averaged, 17, 18 points per game.
In the final three, I think it was 16 or more in the final 3 seasons.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. And so he's a state champion athlete on a really good team. And matter of fact, when he was in high school, they upset IMG Academy when he was there. And he was a key part of that. So these guys can really play basketball. And, you got to look at it too. They're going up against Caleb Love, RJ Davis, and Armando Bacot every single day. Sure, they're probably getting their tails kicked because those guys are really good, but you don't think that makes them better? They're solid players on their own. Honestly, you nailed it on the head. Like, here's North Carolina basketball. Here's, the Walkons, the Biscuit Boys, and then here's the general public down here. It's just crazy how good these guys actually are, but they don't necessarily get the credit for it. And I know, you can look at Walker Miller, right? And
yes,
I don't know if he was a walk-on or maybe he got a scholarship down the line, but he transferred to Monmouth, played a huge role. I think he was second team all conference for
last year. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
for Monmouth. And so guys like that, they leave playing against All-Americans at North Carolina and go make a huge difference at a mid-major. Yeah. So it's cool how good they really are.
And that's even that's a great example in Walker Miller, who rarely saw the court at North Carolina just because it's that much higher, even to go somewhere like Monmouth, which has been a solid school. Obviously, we know the North Carolina connections there with King Rice, and that's awesome. And another one I had thought of is KJ Smith, who went to Pacific his freshman year and was averaged 13 minutes a game as a freshman and was going to be a huge player for Pacific as he went through the years, but ultimately was like, no, I want to go where my dad went. Came to North Carolina. There was that one year, his sophomore or junior year, where he ended up having to play some minutes early in the year just because of injuries and stuff, but really just didn't see the court that much because, again, it's that difficult at this high a level. So, again, as Pac has said, as I've said, look at these guys' numbers. Duwe Farris, 10-5 in high school. Jackson Watkins, as a senior, 12 points, 4 assists a game. Team captain, all conferences. I mean, it's just these are phenomenal basketball players who have made a decision with their basketball careers because they want to be at a place like North Carolina, be part of this family. And so this is going to be a strong statement, but they deserve your respect because of how they've sacrificed their own potential fame and renown to come and maybe win a national championship at one of the most prestigious schools in the country. That says a lot to me about who each of these guys are.
Absolutely.
So let's keep talking about stuff because even while we're talking about, let me say this first, is the thing is a lot of times part of the reason for making this decision is that putting on the uniform itself is the reward. You recognize that you're probably not going to get much playing time unless you're on a phenomenal team that's just blowing everybody out or a terrible team that's getting blown out. You're just probably not going to get many minutes. And so getting on the court is the cherry on top of being part of this roster, putting the uniform on. But at the same time, Pac, where I want to go next with this is there are moments where you have to be ready because you never know. Now, it's not the same thing as like Jacoby Criswell has to be ready because as soon as Drake May gets an injury, he's in. It's not that level, but let's use Stillman White as an example. Came to North Carolina as a freshman in the 11-12 season. And so was filling in for Kendall Marshall because remember Dexter Strickland, now Baden Jackson went down earlier in the season with an ACL. And then we talked about that Creighton, how much we hate Creighton, not Creighton Lebo. We love you, homie, but the University of Creighton because of Ethan Rogge. I will never forget the dude's name, broke Kendall Marshall's wrist and hurt Carolina's chances to show Kentucky that they were the best team in the nation. But Stillman White hops in, helps Carolina get past Ohio in the Sweet 16, but then they just can't do enough to get past Kansas in the Elite Eight. So had that experience as a freshman, called into duty, then goes on his Mormon mission for 2 years, comes back in the 14-15 season, and then as a senior in the 16-17 year, we get to that Elite Eight game with Kentucky, another Elite Eight experience for him. Joel Berry, poor guy's out there just twisting and tweaking ankles all over the floor. And Seventh Woods got into some foul trouble. He picked up 2 first-half fouls. So Coach Williams sends in our man Stillman White. I love this story. I think so often we remember Luke May. We remember all the stuff. We forget what Stillman White did in the first half. He comes in, gets a bucket, draws De'Aaron Fox's second foul, sending him to the bench along with Bam Adebayo, like two of the biggest names in the young stars in the NBA, and then gets an offensive rebound and almost has another important basket, but he like kicks it out of bounds. And so Stillman White comes into that game when honestly, for me, when Joel Berry goes out, seventh gets in that foul trouble, Pack, I was like, dude, Kentucky might start running away with this thing. Stillman comes in, does some things to steady the ship, puts De'Aaron Fox on the bench, and a couple hours later, Luke May's a hero. Now, I'm not saying Stillman White is ultimately responsible for that, but he was part of the winning of that game. Make no bones about it. So while you're probably not often going to play in a role, you have to stay ready. What do you talk about with your teams with that of like, hey, I know you typically don't get in the game, but here's why you as a player need to always be ready?
Well, first of all, shout out to Roy Williams, because that is, to me,
great call.
Partially a mark of a great coach, right? Like everybody on that roster is prepared, and Roy had Stillman White ready to go, and then shout out to Stillman because he was ready to go, right?
Yeah.
And, that's kind of what you talk about as a coach. You do your job to make sure everyone's prepared, everyone understands the game plan, everyone's ready, because like you said, you just don't know. You hope that you don't get to a point where you're just reaching down the bench further and further. But if you do get to that point, you've got to prepare your players, which Roy did. And then, on the flip side, it's like a give take, right? As a coach, we've got to prepare, but then the players also have to step up and rise to the occasion and be ready to go themselves and then display that on the court. And so, and that's exactly what Stillman did. And then Jackson Simmons comes to mind also. I don't know if you remember him.
I loved Jackson Simmons. Absolutely.
Yeah, he was a walk-on. I think he ended up earning a scholarship eventually, but he just is a guy that came in and was I don't even think it was because of injury. He just earned himself
minutes. Yeah.
And,
was it a Florida State game where he came in and just like kind of helped stem the tide and Carolina eventually won? Was that game?
That's it. Yeah, I believe he finished that game with 16. I'm not certain with that, but I believe that's what it was. So,
keep talking. I'll look it up while you're going.
Yeah. And he just – my point is these guys they're coming in, they're working their tail off, and they do such a good job of staying ready. And, if you think about it, it's not exactly easy to do because you don't expect to play as a walk-on. It's like you said earlier, you're there because you get the privilege of wearing that Carolina blue uniform, and it's not something where you expect it, but they stay ready, and then they even fight to earn spots, just like Jackson Simmons did and just like Stillman White did. And so these guys they're really special to have people like that on your team.
I'm not looking at the right season for him, but Jackson had a big contribution. I can't find when it was. Somebody let us know what we're missing. What year was that, and what did he do? We'll get that. But Jackson Simmons, what a great contribution. Loved what he did there. Now, something else I want to ask about that I probably should have brought up earlier, Pack, is so when these guys get in at the end of a game, I love how engaged the regular rotation players stay on the bench. They go absolutely bonkers when these dudes make a play. Why do you think it means so much to them to see these guys succeed or get in the game and do something?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for one, I think these guys have great relationships. I can speak on behalf of Brady, right? Brady has the infamous TikToks with the Biscuit Boys. And so these guys have really good relationships with these players. And so I think they're, first of all, they're just excited that their friends are out there making plays, But secondly, those guys, the Biscuit Boys and the guys on the bench, they do such a good job of bringing energy and communication and things like that throughout the entire game. For them, they're paying it back. And so anytime they make a play and, they're cheering them on, they're rooting them on. And then the other thing is the crowd's amped. The crowd's into it because if the Biscuit Boys are in, that means we're playing for 100 points. So they're kind of feeding off of that energy too. And so it's really cool to see all that happen.
Yeah, and that's such a good point about the friendship, the relationships there, because I think people might think like, oh, we've got the elite players and then the other guys just hang out. Like, no, a basketball team, any sports team, It's all of us, man. We are all in this together. And so it's not that's like, oh, that's that guy, Rob Landry. No, like these dudes are dudes all together. This is a unit, a squad, a team. If they are not that, you are not going to see them be successful. 1 to 15 or 1 to 17, however many you have out there. We are all in on this. Now, one other thing we should bring up with this is that a lot of these guys are called up in North Carolina's scenario, specifically North Carolina's context, is a lot of these guys are called up from the JV squad. Carolina is one of the few schools left in the nation that still has a JV squad. In fact, North Carolina's JV team plays my alma mater, Milligan University in Johnson City, Tennessee. Shout out to the Buffs. And so that's super cool that they do that. Famously, Coach Roy Williams coached the JV team. Hubert Davis coached the JV team. Coach Brad Frederick did last year, and now we just learned this week Jackie Manuel is going to be taking over that program this year, and so he's going to get some great experience. Really excited for that for him. And so, why do you think it's important, and why do you think it's just neat that North Carolina maintains this team?
Well, first of all, I think it's important because it's part of our tradition. It's part of our culture.
Yeah.
We value that, and the players seem to, and the coaches seem to. And I say that because look at, like you mentioned, the coaches that have coached that program. It's obviously valuable. It obviously means something if we're placing those people in charge of that program. And so it's valuable for the kids because, like you said, or valuable for the players because, like you said, they get called up to be a Biscuit Boy or to be part of the Blue Steel, whatever you want to call it. And
love Blue Steel, man. That might be my favorite because I'm a huge Zoolander fan, so I always loved the Blue Steel moniker.
Yeah, I still refer to them as the Blue Steel. I know now it's the Biscuit Boys, so I gotta up my terminology. But I always just say Blue Steel. But it's important to them. It's important to the coaching staff, and it's a part of Carolina tradition and Carolina culture. And I just think it's really important that we continue that.
Speaking of that tradition and culture, for two of these guys, specifically Jackson and Duwe, they are seniors this year. Now, I honestly, I studied if other schools around the country do this to the level that North Carolina does. But that means that they're going to get an opportunity to start a North Carolina basketball game. And that is so stinking cool to me. And by the way, you will all recall that last year's final regular season game was in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Something good happened that night. But that means that this year, Carolina's senior night is going to be against Duke. So for the rest of their lives, Jackson Watkins and Duwe Farris will be able to say that they started a basketball game against the Duke Blue Devils in the Dean Dome. How cool is that, Pat Kilby?
That's awesome. And I hope they come out spraying all over Duke too.
Yes. I mean, it would just like so, and it energizes things, and it's just got this different vibe. And, eventually the regulars are going to check in and that'll be great. But man, just excited to see that. And I love that they have the anticipation of that moment. So, man, anything else to say about these guys? Obviously, as we project to the year ahead, it's the same thing. We don't anticipate that they will get much playing time other than in blowouts. With the 20-game ACC schedule, you have fewer cupcakes on your schedule, but we hope that they get some opportunities to get some good minutes in. And what are you looking for as a coach in that time when the walk-ons come in at the end of a game, Pack?
Well, the main thing is you just want to see them compete. You want to see them get after it. It's hard really to say we want you to execute really well because the focus isn't always great. For one, the crowd's just all over the place because they're in. But, you're also up 20-plus points usually. So focus isn't great. But if they're in there competing, they're not, just jacking around, turning the ball over, things like that. Those are the things you want to see. And then you want to see them having fun and doing the things that make the bench excited and get the crowd riled up and all that good stuff. And these guys, man, they're awesome. They will do just that.
I love it. So, folks, please, I hope you have paid good attention. If you didn't know much about these guys, hopefully you got to learn some about them today. If not, go find out more. And please, if you would, give some love to Duwe. give some love to Creighton, give some love to Rob, give some love to Jackson, and let these guys know how thankful you are that they are part of the North Carolina family. Yes. So that is it for today's episode of Locked on Tar Heels. Coming up tomorrow, another recruiting interview. We're going to talk about Zayden High, who just recently scheduled his official visit to North Carolina for September 30th. Could be a great power forward to bring in next year, because another power forward decided not to come to North Carolina. And we want to thank you for joining us today. You can follow Pack on Twitter at Coach_K23. You can follow the show at Locked on Heels, and you can follow me at Isaac Schade. Now for your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview, an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the 2022 NFL season. The local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network and Odyssey NFL Insiders all combining into one Ultimate NFL Preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, Pack, and I want to thank you for hanging out with us on Hump Day, tuning in, listening to the very last of the roster previews. But we'll have more great stuff coming for you next Wednesday with Coach Pat Kilby and myself. But as for today, we want to remind you that it is always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Until tomorrow, peace.